Good evening, and welcome. I'm pleased and honored to welcome this evening Molly Joseph Ward as our first PLP speaker this semester. Molly has pursued a career of distinguished public service, and her life embodies the qualities of leadership, honor, and service that Christopher Newport hopes to impart to all of our students. Molly comes from a family that has a long dedication to community service. Her grandfather served as mayor of the city of Hampton. An uncle was a Commonwealth's attorney. I read an article in which she said, and I quote, "We're a family of community supporters." I would be remiss tonight if I didn't mention Molly's brother, Jay Joseph. Jay went to Harvard and then went to the University of Pennsylvania to get an MBA, and rather than going to Wall Street, he decided to come home to Hampton, to the peninsula of Virginia, where he has led a successful life as a businessman, and he too is engaged in the life of this community, enriching it in so many ways, especially the life of this university. He served on our Board of Visitors for 8 years. He led the board as our chairman, the rector of the board. He has led our real estate foundation for many, many years. There's absolutely no one who has contributed more to the success of this university than your brother, Jay Joseph. And he is here tonight, and he's one of the most humble leaders I've ever known. And I want him to stand tonight with Tara, his wife, and I want you to give him a rousing round of applause. Jay, Tara. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Tara. Molly Joseph Ward, a graduate of the University of Virginia, a liberal arts major, an English major, and William & Mary Law School, practiced law in her hometown of Hampton, and then in 2001 was elected treasurer of the city of Hampton. In 2008, she was elected mayor of her city, receiving 3/4 of all the votes cast, a rousing election victory. In 2013, President Obama asked Molly Ward to join his administration and serve as special assistant to the President of the United States and as Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House. Then, in 2014, the newly elected governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, asked Molly Ward to serve in his cabinet as Secretary of Natural Resources, overseeing 6 agencies of government. Those agencies that protect and restore Virginia's natural and historic resources. Growing up on the Chesapeake Bay of Virginia, I know Molly cares deeply about our environment. Then, as the McAuliffe years came to an end, Molly returned home to Hampton and was once again elected treasurer of the city she loves. Molly and her husband Forrest have 2 sons, Edwin and George. I've read that everyone in her family are avid walkers, and they have done a lot of trail hiking through the years. Molly Joseph Ward has lived a life of significance, and her leadership and her service have enriched the life of her city, our Commonwealth, and our country. And it's a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce her to you tonight. Thank you, Madam.
Well, good Good evening. It is truly an honor and privilege to be with you. I too want to recognize my brother Jay, who's the smartest one in the family. Maybe next time he can give the speech, and we can judge who is more entertaining. He's here for fact-checking purposes, he told me earlier. But it really is truly an honor. I need to warn you, this is not a traditional speech. Do not use this format in speech class. Toastmasters would expel me for the speech I'm about to give you. But I want to try to communicate to you in a relatively short period of time some principles I believe, based on what I have seen and experienced, that will help you be successful in life. My goal is that maybe by tomorrow, you'll still remember a couple of them. I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about my past, and I have to warn you that it gets a little painful, and it gets painful really quickly. But I'm going to ask you to stick with me. When I graduated from law school 30 years ago, I had two very close female friends. Each of them had been enormously successful in law school. They had graduated in the top 10% of our class. Each one of them had one of the highest paying and most prestigious jobs of anyone else. They were both athletic and beautiful. They were organized and together. They both had handsome, successful boyfriends, and one of them was engaged to a doctor. I didn't have any of those things. In fact, I'm not really sure why they were friends with me, but I loved and admired them both, and they were both very incredibly wonderful people. Well, things went downhill quickly after law school. One of them died in a bathtub in an alcohol-related accident at the age of 35, and the other ended up being charged by the Virginia State Bar with allegations that were so severe that she voluntarily surrendered her bar license and left the state. If you went back in time and told me 30 years ago that one of the three of us would die in an alcohol-related accident in a bathtub, one would have to surrender their bar license, and one of us would be invited by the president of this university to speak to young people about leadership in 2018, and then ask me which one I expected to be, I would say to you, the time traveler, that as I recovered from a truly, truly broken heart, that I did not want to die so young, so I hoped I was the one who had to surrender their bar license, because I was sure as heck would not be the one surviving and invited to talk to you tonight. What happened to us? Why did my friends' lives spiral out of control, and how did I manage to hold it together? I think the simple answer is that life threw them curveballs for which they were not prepared. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that. But at the end of the day, the real world is a messy, scary place, and it caught them way off guard. So back a little farther in time. I was raised in Hampton. My parents had both been married before when my parents got married in the late 50s. My mother came from a fairly waspy family, was college educated, and my dad was Jewish and never graduated from high school. That was a pretty exotic union at the time. I think my mother's entire family was pretty horrified, but that's a story for another day. They were unusually modern for their day and time, evidenced by their decision to get married in and of itself, but they're also each a little crazy. My dad in particular had a pretty unorthodox approach to life, and he thought about problem solving in a way that most people did not and could not. This was the good part about him being a little bit crazy. I remember once when I was little and credit cards first came out, and my mom wanted one, and the bank told her she could not have one unless she got her husband's permission. My mom came home pretty perturbed about this, but my dad thought it was funny. He sent me off to get a crayon and a piece of white construction paper. On this piece of white construction paper with the purple crayon, he wrote, "Dear Mr. Bank, it's okay with me if my wife get a credit card. Signed, Edwin." My mom got the credit card. Problem solved. When we were growing up, my dad would give us odd jobs to do. They weren't the normal jobs parents give kids, like cutting the grass or emptying the dishwasher. My odd job was to be the family baker. My dad was very much a gourmet, or a gourmand as he used to say, a gourmet being a fastidious eater and a gourmand being a more enthusiastic one. And he often planned elaborate dinner parties. He wasn't really interested in making breads and desserts, so he assigned these tasks to me. This was before any of these types of things were available for purchase. You either made it yourself or you went without. At any rate, I was pretty young, like 10 or 12, when he started tearing out recipes out of the New York Times and assigning them to me to make. He would tear out a recipe for, say, a chocolate cake and tell me he wanted to make for his Sunday night dinner party. Often the recipes were way above my skill level and required special ingredients that weren't necessarily readily available. Anyway, it would get to be Saturday afternoon, and my dad would inquire about how dessert was going. And I would tell him I couldn't find the right kind of chocolate, or that we didn't have the right kind of pans, or I had not successfully caught a ride to the grocery store. And he would say, "I did not ask you to tell me about your problems. I asked you where the cake was." As a result, I learned never to tell my dad how hard I was trying to get something done, but to only focusing on telling him what I had gotten done. This approach eventually led me to develop a theory in life that people are either process or results oriented. Some people like to talk about what they would like to get done and how they are going to do it and why they're going to do it in a certain way. Those people are more interested in the process than the outcome. Then there are people that care about getting from point A to point B. They care much less about how you accomplish the goal and are focused on what you actually accomplished. Despite eventually being able to bake a mean loaf of bread and learning to be goal-oriented, I was never one of those people in college who knew what they wanted to do with their life. I hoped to live an honest life and a decent life and be able to support myself, and that's about as far as I got. I went to college and managed to finish on time, but I was really just putting one foot in front of the other. I went to law school after college more because I didn't know what else to do with my life than any burning desire to be a lawyer. I stumbled through law school, managed to graduate and pass the bar and secure a job, and that is when my real journey of discovery began. I became much more motivated by the real world and real problems than I had ever been motivated by academics, but I was thrown into the practice of law the way people throw small children in the pool to teach them to swim. And in the cases I worked on, there were real consequences for real people. Back then, lawyers didn't necessarily specialize in any particular area, and I was given all kinds of cases: divorces, DUIs, bankruptcy, real estate deals to close, estate work, literally just about anything you can imagine, and I was completely terrified. I had no business handling half the stuff I did. I was sent to federal district court, traffic court, circuit court, juvenile court, general district court, and most of the time, I wasn't even really sure where I was supposed to stand. I felt like an imposter and spent a lot of time staring at the ceiling at night, praying I did not accidentally ruin someone's life. I ultimately narrowed my practice to collections work, got pretty good at it, got married, and had 2 children. I have run for office 5 times and have never lost a precinct. I've worked on countless campaigns and survived many potential scandals. I've been appointed to numerous boards and commissions and have been involved in some epic power struggles. I have most recently lived through 4 years in Richmond in the governor's cabinet and 4 General Assembly sessions. I have a lot of scabs and scars from all those years, and I can ultimately tell you that life is one big chess game, and there are rules that will make you successful, and the paths that you take will determine whether you spend your life treading water or actually getting stuff done. I'm going to tell you all of my secrets, so you do not have to suffer and struggle like I did. Listen up and take notes. I can save you decades of unnecessary pain. I don't see everybody whipping out their paper. Also, it's important to note these things belong to all areas of life, work and your civic life. I think it's very important to be active in your community. But this will work in your personal life as well. So, principle number 1. No one ever wishes you had spoken for a longer period of time. That includes me right now. And I know it. I know. There may have been a handful of speeches in the history of time of people giving speeches or talking at meetings or whatever where somebody wished you'd spoken for longer. A handful. And of the 10 gazillion times every year somebody gets up to speak, the very first thing you start thinking is, I hope this doesn't last very long. If you're given 20 minutes to speak, take 10. Say only what you need to say and stop. My dad was very involved in the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts have this award they give to people that have given their life to Boy Scouts called the Silver Beaver. And they have the big dinner, with white tablecloths and invocations and on and on and on. So the night goes on, and people talk. The United States Congressman gets up and introduces my father, and he spends 10 or 15 minutes introducing him. My dad's allotted 30 minutes on the program, and you can tell everybody's looking at their watch and yawning. And he gets up and he gets his award and he says, "Thank you so very much. I am very honored to receive this award." And he sat down and he got a standing ovation. And I thought, I learned a lesson right then. No one ever wishes you talk for a longer period of time. That's principle number 1. Principle number 2, be kind to everyone always, no matter what. First of all, there's no reason not to be nice to other people, even when they don't deserve it. Let people merge in front of you in traffic and cut you in front of you in line at Target. Who cares? Give up the idea of giving someone a piece of your mind or telling them off. It never does any good. It probably makes you seem like a jerk. You also never know what the future holds. Life may very well send back that person that you were either kind or ugly to back into your life. When I was at the White House, I worked with a lot of really smart, ambitious young people. And one of them, for purpose of this story, I'm going to say was Sally. Sally had gone to an Ivy League college. She was determined to make her life successful on Capitol Hill. And so one of the ways a lot of young people get involved in politics is to work on a campaign. So Sally worked on this campaign, and one of the other women in the office, I'm going to call her Debbie for the purpose of the story, was on her way out. Sally got told by the other people in the office, "Look, don't befriend Debbie. She's not long for this world. They're getting rid of her." So consequently, when Debbie would speak to Sally at the cooler or at the copier or ask her out to lunch, she ignored her. She treated her like she couldn't even hear what she was saying. Fast forward 3 years. Sally gets a job gets a job interview with the United States Senator's office. She walks in feeling all confident, and who's sitting behind the interview desk? Debbie. And Debbie says, "Sally, I took this interview with you just so I could look you in the eye and tell you I would not hire you to cut my grass." Now imagine if she'd just been nice. All right? What would it cost her? Not a lot. 3, relationships are everything. Everything. The reason people get things done is because of relationships with other people. You can't develop these relationships virtually. And don't focus just on relationships with powerful people. Do we have to go back to number 2? Be kind and nice to everybody? Don't do it because you're mercenary. Do it because it's the right thing to do. You never know when that person's going to show back up. People do things for more reasons than money. They do people favors because it makes them feel good. They do things for friends. When I was mayor, there was a man, in the first place, line of defense for this is all the security people and all the janitors and all the people in your buildings. Every time I get a new job and I walk into an office building, the first thing I befriend everybody who has been there for a long time. I don't worry about people who are my alleged peers. I worry about every single person behind every single desk and try to befriend them. At City Hall, there's a security guard that comes on at night, and he manages the building. And he is like 6'5" and weighs 300 pounds. He's a pretty scary looking guy. And he walked me to my car when I had death threats. He stood by me through thick and thin because we were friends, and I cared about him and he cared about me. One time I got stuck in the elevator at City Hall, and it's 8 stories high, and the fire department didn't seem to be able to get me out. Nobody able to seem to get me out. Well, then my friend, the security guard, showed up for a shift, heard I was stuck in the elevator, ran up 8 flights of stairs, pried open the elevator doors with his bare hands, reached in and pulled me out. Now, do you think he would have done that if I didn't care about him and he didn't care about me? No. Relationships are everything. I'd probably still be in that elevator. 4, never put anything in writing you don't want to see on the front page of the New York Times. My grandmother told me this one, and it's universally well known, but people still don't follow it. You have no expectations of privacy in email, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, or anything else, not even a text. It can and will come back to bite you. Why people put things in email that they do, I will never understand. You know what happens after you've written an email? You never know what happens to that email after you push send. You can ask Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, Anthony Weiner, and the FBI. How is it possible we have not learned this lesson? It's bewildering. 4, never put anything in writing you don't want to see on the front pages of the New York Times. Number 5, get on a plane. You need to talk to someone, you have an important message, get out of your chair and walk down the hall and talk to them. Walk down the street, get in your car, get on a bus, get on a train, get on a plane, and go see them. Don't tell them how difficult it was to get there or how much it cost. Remember, they don't care, plus they know anyway. Show up to talk to them. They will know that whatever it is important to you. 2 years ago, I had a bunch of staff come to my office when I was working for Governor McAuliffe, and they wanted to talk to me about this case that had been pending for decades in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. It had to do with DuPont Chemical and a mercury spill that happened for years and years, a long time ago, in the South Fork of the Shenandoah River in Waynesboro. And no one had ever settled this case. And 12 years earlier, the state, together with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, had filed a lawsuit against DuPont. So staff came and they said, listen, we're going to get ready to have the presidential administration change. Dow is merging with DuPont. We think this might be the time to settle the case. I said, all right, great, let's do it. Who do we talk to? Who can decide, how much we settle for and how to move forward? And they said, well, the regional director for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They said, we'd like you to call her. I said, well, how much is the case worth? Oh, we're hoping $50 million. You want me to call her? Where is she? She's in Hadley, Massachusetts. I was like, let's go see her. They're like, it's going to take all day. I'm like, you don't think I can take a day to go get $50 million? Get on the plane if it's important to you, all right? We made a handshake that day, and that was done. We were done. We settled that case, 8th largest settlement in the history of the United States, largest in the history of Virginia, because we got on a plane and flew to Hadley, Massachusetts. Number 6, along the same line, email is not for everything. We all know just how little effort it took you to sit down and spend 30 or 45 seconds typing out that message. You want somebody to notice you? Go out tomorrow and buy some decent stationery and start writing handwritten thank you notes. Also, you need some stamps. I don't know if you guys have stamps, but I actually keep the handwritten notes I get. Emails, they're lost in the swamp. You want to express sympathy to someone or tell them that you love them? Email won't do it, and neither can Hallmark. You need to do it yourself. My first day on the job at the White House, I walked in, and all the smart Ivy League kids are sitting around the table, and they said, we have a problem. All right, so my job, I was in charge of intergovernmental relations with cities. So I was in charge of relationship with local mayors and city council members. We walk into this meeting, they said, we have a problem. They said, no one's responded. We only have a 50% response rate to our White House Christmas party invitations. So I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds really off. What's usually the response rate? They're like, 99.9%. Now, I was no stranger to White House party invitations. I got them as mayor. And there are elaborate things they send at Christmas. like worthy of framing or keeping as a souvenir. They're so gorgeous. So I said, well, when do we mail the invitations? Mail them? They said, we decided to save money, so we emailed everyone this year. So I said, there's 500 mayors all across the country still waiting for their souvenir invitation, and some kid in the White House sends them an email. So I said, let me see the email list. So they show it to me, and it's like Michael Bloomberg at newyork.gov. I'm like, do you think Michael Bloomberg got that email? We need to get on the phone and call all these people and tell them they were invited. We have to communicate with them. Email doesn't do it. Emails are great for a lot of things. Communicating, not so much. When I was mayor, I kept getting emails, these pesky emails from Joe Biden, and so I would delete them. After about 3 months, the clerk comes in and she says, have we been deleting emails from the Vice President of the United States? I said, I keep getting them, but I keep deleting them. Yeah, I'm assuming it's spam. She goes, no, he actually wants to talk to you. Number 7, there is no job too big or too small. You have to do what it takes to accomplish the mission. There's no shame in taking out the trash. I had an event last spring with the governor where not only did I staff him for an entire day, write a speech on the fly, and manage his complicated schedule, I made kale salad and cookies for a luncheon we were attending because we needed salad and cookies at the luncheon. There's no job that is beneath you because what matters is that you achieve the goal. No job too big or too small. Number 8, there's a fine line between advocacy and stalking, and you need to find it. You need to find that point where you get your point across, but nobody calls the police, right? When I was mayor, we wanted very badly, the city wanted very, very badly, and many, many people wanted very badly to see Fort Monroe made a national monument. Well, we got told it was impossible, but I felt it was my mayoral duty to try to pursue this goal. So there's 2 ways you can get a national monument. One is through Congress, and the other is the president can actually just sign an order making a piece of property a national monument. So I started going to D.C. regularly, back and forth, meeting with our congressional delegation and meeting with officials at the Department of the Interior and trying to persuade them that we should make Fort Monroe a national monument. And I got sweetly taken into the back room with staff and told, you need to give up hope. You know, that Congress is not going to do this. There's no money, there's no will, so you just need to go home. So I thought, well, there's this other way. The president can sign an order to make it a national monument. So maybe that's a possibility. And everybody said, well, no, that's not going to work because President Obama has shown no willingness to sign such an order. He's had lots of opportunities to make other things national monuments, and he hasn't done it. And we're 3 years into his first term. It's just not going to happen. So then I started thinking, well, I don't know President Obama, but, I know Tim Kaine, and Tim Kaine knows President Obama. So about a week later, Tim Kaine comes into my office. He was getting ready to run for U.S. Senate. And he said, is there anything I can do for you? And I said, yes, you can talk to President Obama about making Fort Monroe a national monument. And that particular Sunday, the New York Times had published an article in New York Times Magazine talking about why Fort Monroe is so important. So I handed it to him. And I said, here, can you take this to the White House and try to convince them that they should make Fort Monroe a national monument? He says, is there anything else I can do for you besides this? And I was like, no, this is the one thing I want from you. The city of Hampton wants from you. So Tim Kaine goes to the White House and actually does get some movement, but President Obama still won't sign the order. So now I get an invitation to go to the University of Richmond. President Obama is going to be at the University of Richmond, and they've invited me to be in the clutch. And what the clutch is like the 30 or so people that get to meet the president when he shows up at an event. You get your picture taken with him. So I hate to stand in line. I don't want to drive to Richmond. There's no $50 million in it, so I don't want to drive to Richmond. But I do. I do it for the love of my city and the love of Fort Monroe. So I get in the car and I drive to Richmond, and I decided that when I get my little 1.5 seconds to talk to the president, I'm going to ask him to make Fort Monroe a national monument. That's why I'm making the trip. So I'm in the clutch, and everybody goes up and talks to him, and so it's my turn. And so I have to start talking as soon as I'm walking towards the president. And I say, Mr. President, I'm Molly Ward. I'm the mayor of Hampton, and I want you to make Fort Monroe a national monument by the time I get to him, right? And get the click, get your picture. And he goes, I'll see what I can do. I thought that was such a great answer, and I use it all the time now, because it's not really no. And it's not really yes. So luck would have it, a month later, he's going to be at Langley Air Force Base. Oh my goodness, couldn't believe it. Bring in the senior leadership team at City Hall. I go, look, you guys, we got to do something. We got to find that fine line. We're not stalking. We don't want them to think we're crazy. But we want them to know we're serious. So we had everybody wear green that was going to be in the clutch. We asked everybody to wear green. We had ribbons made so everybody could wear green ribbons. We had all the school children wear green. We figured out which way he might be going into Langley Air Force Base because there were only a couple routes. We put signs out saying, please, Mr. President, make Fort Monroe a national monument. So we're standing in the clutch, and I'm trying to be the last person. I keep on letting people go in front of me. And I'd say tell him you want to make Fort Monroe a national monument. So every single person goes up to the president and says, Mr. President, we'd like you to make Fort Monroe a national monument. And this includes, Governor McDonnell at the time was there. He had on a green tie, and our local, Bobby Scott, our congressman, everybody. So I waited till the very end, and I went up and I said, Mr. President, same thing. Mr. President, I'm Molly Ward. I'm the mayor of Hampton. We want you to make Fort Monroe a national monument. And he goes, I know. So he gets in the car. He calls Ken Salazar, who's the Secretary of the Interior, and he says, why haven't we done this already? Everybody wants it. And 11 days later, I was standing behind President Obama when he signed the order to make Fort Monroe a national monument. 11 days. Lesson number 9, the 5-second MBA. When I went to Weimar Law School, and I'm sure they still have it, they had a 4-year program where you could get your JD and your MBA in 4 years instead of 5. So my dad was paying for law school, so I went to my dad and I said, hey, I really think I want to do this 4-year program and get an MBA and a JD. He goes, no, you don't need an MBA. He said, let me explain it to you. My dad, I told you, he didn't graduate from high school, but he was a very successful businessman. He put on a piece of paper like this, and he wrote money in on one side and money out on the other. He said, take more money in than you spend, then you'll be successful in business. So there you go. There's your 5-second MBA. You're welcome. Number 10, give more than you receive. As you venture forth, be the one who gets there early and stay late. Never measure what you're owed or count how many times you bought the coffee. Be the one who contributes more to the universe than your fair share. It will benefit and enrich your life in a way that may not be completely obvious today, but will come back to you. So number 10, give more than you receive. I'm going to give you one bonus principle. So I would only normally give you 10, but tonight's a special occasion. I'm going to give you the bonus one. This is from my mom. Take life seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. This means life is a serious business, but you should approach it with humor and humility. You are all standing in the front of your lives. You may think other people have it wired. You may even be one of those people who actually does have it wired. But either way, you'll be greatly benefited by having some rules to live by, so that when life throws you those curveballs, you can duck or you can hit them before you hit you. I hope this has been helpful, and good luck, peace, and best wishes to all of you. Hopefully I finished way ahead of time and adhered to principle number 1, and we have time for questions if anybody wants to ask a question. Of course, we could really finish ahead of time. You all could help me adhere to the principles and we could not have any questions. All right, I think that answers it.
All right, don't go. We're going to go. I think your response underscores that this is absolutely one of our very best presentations. Won't you agree? Thank you. Thank you. I wrote all 11 down. And I will send those out to you tomorrow to make sure that you don't forget. A great night. Thank you very much.